Hello and welcome, everyone. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. You're listening to My Strategy. We're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. We're very glad that you could join us here today, and I'm very happy to be here with you. Our My Strategy episodes are live and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. In this episode, we're going to talk about tips to getting things done. Talk a little bit about strategies and ways that you can do things and accomplish things even when you don't want to. Again, very happy to be here. Saturday for me is a great day to reflect. It's the day of the week that I choose to start thinking about my actions and what I could be doing differently. But keep in mind that any time is a great time to assess your strategy. My Strategy show is growing. We're continuing to grow. We're available on most digital platforms out there, such as iHeart, iTunes, Player FM, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spreaker. So if you do miss this episode, there's past episodes there, along with all the episodes that we put together. You can find me on social platforms at Twitter at HawkinsJohn or johnmhawkins.com. And just like anything in life, we need to have a strategy and plans to help us reach our goals, because the best laid plans don't always work. Well, today we're going to be talking about wasted time and how we can get things done. So I'm looking for your stories. So if you have a good example, story, tip, or trick, please send it to talk@johnmhawkins.com. We do have a weekly prize giveaway where you can win a copy of my latest book, Coach to Greatness, and also a $25 gift card. It's your choice which gift card you like. We have a Starbucks and also a Visa gift card. Well, how do we get things done when we don't want to do them? That's the topic of today. We're going to talk about some studies that show how many hours in a week we waste. Now, this is a work week that we're not productive. We're going to talk about some of the low-value items, how many days a week people are working, how much time people are looking at their screens. It's not a negative, but it's something to think about if we're having an issue getting things done. We're then going to talk about the reasons why we put things off. Is it that we're afraid that we're going to mess up? We don't feel like doing it. Things are hard, boring, or unpleasant, and as a result of that, we don't want to do them. Then I'll take you into another perspective. I have some research here and some tips for someone who has ADHD. And these are quite interesting. And I think in going through those, it's given me a different perspective on how to look at this. So for many people, they don't have issues that prevent them from doing what they want. But it's interesting to look at it from someone with an ADHD perspective. We're then going to talk about some strategies to get things done. We've got about 17 or so tips and tricks that we can use to do things, to be able to accomplish our things that we don't want to do, such as waking up early. Do the hardest thing first. Clear off your desk. That can actually help you. We'll then put it all together and come up with a robust, soundproof strategy that you can use to help get things done you don't want to do. New study shows that you're wasting 21 hours a week. It's according to David Finkel. He says here, which of these thieves is stealing 21 hours a day of your week? Early in 2017, Mr. Finkel's, who has a business coaching firm, launched a comprehensive study on time management. He interviewed and surveyed small business owners, their key executives, in order to learn how they spent their time, and in particularly where their time was wasted. As he began this investigation, he kept hearing the same concerns over and over and over again. My business coaching clients keep saying, David, I just don't have the time to do the things that I know I want to do and I need to do in the business. David, of course, was able to understand that since he's been a business owner for over 25 years. He reports that there was a Covey Center investigational research that investigated the emerging lengths of the American work week. Not surprisingly, the work week is getting longer and longer. They had surveyed more than 400 executives, business owners, entrepreneurs, and discovered that the average business leader works 72 hours a week. It says here the age-old 40-year-old work week is gone. He said that in a Gallup and Wells Fargo poll, it found that 57% of small business owners work 6 days a week, and 20% of them work 7 days a week. The work week is getting longer, which means that if we're wasting 21 hours a week, it's roughly 30% of our work week that is being lost. The business leaders they polled spent 6.8 hours a week on low-value business activities that they could easily have paid somebody else for. They wasted 3.9 hours per week indulging in what we might call escapist mental health breaks, such as YouTube videos and checking their social media. They wasted 3.4 hours a week handling low-value emails, 3.2 hours a week dealing with low-value interruptions that could have easily been handled by someone else. They spent 1.8 hours a week handling low-value requests from coworkers, and another 1.8 hours a week working on preventable fires. And finally, in their study, they found that they spent an average of 1 hour per week sitting in completely non-productive or wasteful meetings. He summed all of that, David summed all that up and found that we're looking at 21 hours wasted each week that was going up in smoke while they were not contributing to their company. Now, for those of you who don't own businesses or are looking at your own personal time or you're in a career, it might be a little bit different, but you can get a good appreciation for how these leaders of businesses are handling their time. And their businesses depend on them. If they're not working, their business isn't working. So how could they start thinking about things differently? Now, for you, it might be different, or you might be one of those business owners. We don't know. Got another report here that says that the average American spend more time than ever watching videos, browsing social media, swiping their lives away on their tablets and smartphones. American adults spend more than 11 hours per day watching, reading, listening, or simply interacting with media, according to a new study by market group research Nielsen, which is up from 9 hours, 32 minutes just 4 years ago. The information I'm sharing here is from an article written by Quentin Fottrell. It says people spend most of their waking time staring at screens. In the first quarter of the U.S., U.S. adults spent 3 hours and 48 minutes a day on computers, tablets, and smartphones. It was a 13-minute increase from the previous quarter, and 62% of that time is attributed to app, web browsing, or smartphones. Television still account for the majority of the media usage, with 4 hours and 46 minutes spent watching TV every day in the first quarter of this year. Lots of time spent on tasks that are not yielding results. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about the reasons why we put things off. Not going to want to miss it. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. You're listening to My Strategy. We're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, today we're talking about tips to get things done and giving you some strategies to do things that you really don't want to do. Right before the break, we were talking about how much time we waste in our work week. In this segment, I want to talk about some of the reasons why we put things off. Are you afraid you'll mess up? You don't feel like doing it. It's hard, boring, or it's unpleasant. Those are some of the reasons. Heidi Grant Halverson, PhD, says we don't do them. She says she's got an article here called How to Make Yourself Do It When You Just Don't Want to. She's got strategies to help us from putting things off. She says here all those projects that you've left on the back burner, the one with the deadlines that are growing uncomfortably near. And there's the client whose phone call you really should return, or perhaps a boss or coworker. The one that does nothing but complain and ease up your valuable time. Wait, weren't you going to try to go to the gym more often this year? Right? We talked about all of our resolutions. She says, can you imagine a much less guilt-free and stress-free way to handle all of this? She's given us some good news, she says. She's got reasons why we put this off and also gives us some solutions. You might want to jot some of these down. I sure did. Number one, she says, you're putting something off because you're afraid you will screw it up. Her solution is adopt a preventative focus. She says there are two ways to look at any task. You can do something because you see it as a way to end up better off than you are now. So it would be an achievement or an accomplishment, as in, if I complete this project successfully, I will impress my boss. Or if I work out regularly, I will look amazing. She says psychologists call this a promotion focus. And research shows that when you have one, you're motivated by the thought of making gains and work best when you feel eager and optimistic. Sounds like something that you are passionate about. She says it sounds good, doesn't it? Well, if you are afraid you will screw up the task in question, this is not the focus for you. Anxiety and doubt undermine the promotion motivation, leaving you less likely to take any action at all. What you need is a way of looking at things at what you need to do isn't undermined by doubt, ideally one that thrives in it. So rather than a promotion focus, she suggests a prevention focused. Instead of thinking about how you can end up better off, you see the task as a way to hang on to what you've already got, to avoid loss. For the preventative focus, successfully completing a project is a way to keep your boss from being angry or thinking less of you. Working out regularly is a way of not letting yourself go. She says there's decades of research that support this. And she actually wrote a book on it called Focus. Interesting when you look at it. Preventative versus promotion. Are you scared of losing what you have, or are you seeking to gain? Interesting way to look at it. She's got reason number 2 here, which is you're putting something off because you don't feel like it. Imagine that. You don't feel like it. I'm sure many can relate. She does provide a solution. She says, make like Spock and just ignore your feelings because their feelings are getting in your way. She says in a book, The Antidote, Happiness for People Who Can't Stand Positive Thinking, the author Oliver Burke points out that much of the time when we say things like, I just can't get out of bed in the morning, or I just can't get myself to exercise, what we really mean is that we can't get ourselves to feel like doing these things. After all, no one is tying you to your bed. Intimidating bouncers aren't blocking the entrance to your gym. Physically, nothing is happening to you. You just don't feel like it. But as Burke asks, who says you need to wait until you feel like doing something in order to start doing it? Well, that's novel. Think about that for a minute, because it's really important, she says. Somewhere along the way, we've all bought into the idea without consciously realizing it, that to be motivated and effective, we need to feel like we want to take action. We need to be eager to do so. She says, I really don't know why we believe this because it's 100% nonsense. Interesting. I guess if we did wait till we felt like doing something, we might not ever do it. She says, Berkman points out that many of the most prolific artists, writers, innovators have become so in part because of their reliance on work routines that force them into a certain number of hours per day, no matter how uninspired or how many instances they were hung over or other situations as to how bad they felt. He reminds us of a renowned artist, Chuck Close's observation that inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us show up and get to work. Which bucket do you fit in? Are you waiting for that inspiration, or do you set aside the time and do it? Number 3, you are putting something off because it's hard, boring, or otherwise unpleasant. Her solution is then to use if-then planning. She says too often we try to solve this particular problem with sheer will. Next time I will make myself start working on this sooner. And of course, if we actually had the willpower to do that, we never would have put it off in the first place. It says here, studies show that people routinely overestimate their capacity for self-control and rely on it too often to keep them out of hot water. So she suggests, do yourself a favor and embrace the fact that your willpower is limited. I guess she's saying we're weak. We have no will. And if that may not always be, and it may not always be up to the challenge of helping you get things done. So she says, if that's the case, use if-then planning. Making an if-then plan is more than just deciding what specific steps you need. She says it's also deciding when and where you need to take them. So let's say, for example, if it's 2 p.m., then I will stop doing and start work on the report Bob has asked for. If my boss doesn't mention my request for a raise, then I will bring it up before the end of my meeting. By deciding in advance exactly what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, there's no deliberating when the time comes. She says, do I really have to do this now, or can it wait till later? So if you set up the if-then situation, you're giving yourself a place in time, a point in time, to execute the other action. So those are some of those things that Heidi Grant has recommended. For one is you're putting something off because you're afraid you'll screw it up. You're putting something off because you don't feel like doing it. And 3 is you're putting something off because it's hard or otherwise unpleasant. Interesting perspective. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, when we come back, we're going to take another perspective at why we're not able to get things done when we don't want to. You're not going to want to miss this. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host. You're listening to My Strategy. We're on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, very happy to be here with you today. Really glad that you could join us. Episodes are live and on Saturdays. We'd love to get your thoughts. We'll be taking calls later in the show. Our studio number is 866-451-1451. So if you'd like to call in later in the show at 866-451-1451. Or send us an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. This week we're talking about tips to getting things done even when you don't want to. Right before the break, we were talking about reasons why we put things off. Are we afraid? We don't feel like it. It was hard, boring, or unpleasant. Well, that's assuming we have a choice. Some people don't have a choice. So I thought I'd bring in a little bit of a different perspective. Got an article here written by Judith Kohlberg, and this is actually written for someone with ADHD. You know, I think it's sometimes when we're looking at it, trying to improve our lives, trying to develop our personal strategies, trying to accomplish things at work, and we're not able to do them, it might not be that we don't know how to do them or don't have the tools necessary personally, but it might be that there is a chemical or an emotional reason why we're not able to do them. So I want to cover these ideas here because, number one, some of them make sense, so we could apply them. But also, if you do find yourself struggling and do have ADHD, it would behoove you to get a professional opinion. Judith says, every day we're confronted with endless information, interruptions, distractions, work, and other stuff. Seems like a theme here. All of these butts up against one thing that remains finite: time. Getting things done is problematic. She goes on about how spending time on the web is a temptation for everyone. She says especially for people with ADHD, but it gets in the way of getting things done. The internet provides volumes of information for solving problems, satisfying a curiosity, or researching a topic, and individuals with ADHD can get caught up in information hunts and the excitement of finding new things on the web. She says we need to put brakes on our searches. One of her clients, she said, spent as much time researching on how to get a grass stain out of her child's jeans as she did finding a summer camp for her child to attend. Her client had to learn to stop going deep and wide on every problem, and now she spends less time on low-consequence items like grass-stained jeans and more time on finding things like ADHD-friendly breakfasts that are high in protein. She goes through some of the challenges that they face, and I think some of these are relatable. Too much information. She says information comes at us all the time, so capturing it becomes so important. We used to say, write it down, write it down, write it down. But in the era of too much information, there are better ways to write things down besides writing it on your hand. She gives some tips here. She says there's some apps out there that give you the ability to trigger your actions or what you need to do. She says if you need to save verbal information, little bits of advice, websites people throw at you, one thing you want to remember, she says suggests that you call it to your voicemail or leave yourself a personal message. She also says there's two apps out there like Dragon Dictation. One app she recommends is Instacorder. You can push the record button, leave a voice message on it, or hit the camera icon, take a photo, which is sent to your email address. You can also print out text messages if you need them. There's another app she used called Treasure My Text. Next one she says is Too Distracted to Finish. Distractibility and the executive functional challenges people prevent individuals with ADHD from completing chores and tasks. She recommends that you finish something. Even a small task can lead into success and give you the confidence that you can complete larger tasks. What about if it's too boring to bother with? She says if you're putting off cleaning out a closet, is there anything more boring that you could think of? Think about what you'll gain. Better yet, Write the gains down, reclaiming the money you left in those handbags, making the place to see what you actually own. Get a tax donation for clothing. The next one she has is ignoring a to-do list. I sometimes ignore my to-do list. An old organizational standby is to schedule tasks. You have your to-do list, but you have to link getting things done to committing them on a timeline. So it's important to make a list of things to do. She says that that's not always the best way to do it. She says you have a much higher chance if you schedule the task, put it on a calendar, schedule it in the future, as opposed to writing a list of what you need to do. It's a nuance, but it's a way to look at your activities differently. Next one she says is all chores seem the same. They're boring. Do different kinds of things in different kinds of places. It's an ADHD-friendly way to optimize your focus and attention. Her client, named Marcia, gave up doing her taxes at home because it was a setup for failure. So from April 1st to April 3rd, she moved to a local hotel. She hauled all her records in her room. She'd log on to her laptop and do it there. I think, too, she says, recommending that some people with ADHD are not able to handle the quiet of a library. They would be more productive in a place like Starbucks with some background noise. Brainstorming a new marketing plan requires different environment from a hotel room or a conference hall. It's a good point. You don't always gain your best productive moments in your office. It's so familiar. If you go to a Starbucks, take a drive, go for a walk, take the dog for a walk, it might give you some ideas. It's me versus the clutter. She says one thing that's important is organization, and expand your idea of organizational help to include others. Stop trying to be an ordinary person who keeps it together the same way that people without ADHD do. What about troubles beginning a task? She says it often doesn't matter where you started decluttering tasks. Begin at any spot in the room. After you start, though, continue in some kind of logical order. Start at the left side of the room. Keep going through in a circle. If you start on a top shelf, then work your way down. Have a process that's orderly. She goes through and gives some other tips as well, such as if you schedule a task but ignore it, when worry prevents you from getting things done, not being able to prioritize your to-do list. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk about 17 strategies to help you get things done. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. The show is called My Strategy. Well, very happy to be here with you today. I'm glad that you could join us. My Strategy episodes are live and on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. Today we're talking about tips to getting things done. In this episode, we're talking about strategies to get things done even when you don't want to do them. Love to get your thoughts later in the show. If you'd like to call in, our studio number is 866-451-1451, or send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com. That's talk@johnmhawkins.com. And if you do send an email, you'll be entered into our giveaway, where you can win a copy of my latest book, Coach to Greatness, and a $25 Visa gift card. Right before the break, we're talking about another perspective on getting things done, and we went through the if someone had ADHD and what they would do. And I think that, some of those tips and tricks that are mentioned there might be designed for somebody who struggles with ADHD, but they also sort of made sense for someone who doesn't struggle. In this segment, I want to talk about 17 tips and tricks to get things done and be more productive in your workday. This is something that Rose Leadham put together. She says sometimes she wishes there were more hours in the day. Boy, isn't that the theme? Everybody wishes they had more hours. Unfortunately, we can't control time. What we can control is our productivity. Being cautious with how we spend our time is vital to getting more things done during the day. She gives some good tips like waking up earlier, meditating, creating a daily to-do list. There's a number of ways to make the most out of every minute. Do you want to be more productive during your day? She's given us these 17 hacks. Number 1, and you might not like this hack, but it's something you might try to. Wake up an hour earlier. Even if you don't identify as a morning person, you can still become one. By setting your alarm an hour earlier than usual, and not hitting the snooze button, you'll be better able to you'll get an extra hour of uninterrupted, peaceful work time. Might work for some, not for others. We'll go through these at face value. Number 2, make a daily to-do list. Create a daily list of realistic tasks to tackle every day. Keep it simple, too. Your tasks don't need to be massive jobs. It will take hours to complete. If you need to fold your laundry, add that to the list. Need to call the doctor, add that. The micro tasks will not only help you get more done on a daily basis, but they'll also help you to reach your bigger goals too. And I think that's something that makes sense, right? If you're feeling unmotivated, not getting anything done, get a bunch of little goals done, and all of a sudden you feel accomplished and achieved. Next one is do the hardest task first. It's best to get those dreaded tasks out of the way first. After getting that big chunk of difficulty out of the way, your rest of your day is freed up. Clear off your desk. Boy, what is it with desks and messy desks? She says, as the time goes, out of sight, out of mind. This can be true for staying focused. Taking 15 minutes before work and every day to clear off your desk and create a clean workspace will help you focus and avoid distraction. Trash that you don't need, you can file, or you can trash what you don't need and file the rest. Exercise in the morning. Go for a quick jog or do some yoga. Getting a workout in the morning is linked to better mood and higher levels of productivity, says a Harvard psychiatry professor, Dr. John Ratney. He explained that this exercise is vital in reaching high performance. Set up a system. Having a system of organization will give you clear and consistent idea of the projects you have going on. This inventory of commitments will bring clarity, focus, and control. Focus on one thing at a time. Focus on getting one project before switching to the next. People usually think they're getting things done by multitasking, but in reality, the going back and forth, the context switching, takes time and isn't beneficial. Start saying no. Boy, we could do a whole show on this one. Sometimes that little word is the hardest to say, but it's okay to say. It's important to manage people's expectations. So if you can't take something on and give it 100%, then don't agree to it in the first place. She says here, what about get enough sleep? This is number 9. She said, this is once a given, but you'll be surprised at how few people actually do get enough sleep every night. According to the National Sleep Foundation, the average adult needs 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. Are you getting that much? Keep your emails organized. Seeing 200 emails, unread emails in your inbox will only give you anxiety. It's important that you don't overlook any important messages, but also important to clean up the inbox. She then recommends shutting down social media. Take a break from the hustle and bustle of the outside world and avoid getting on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. They will only distract you. For people who need social media for work, make sure you're logged out of any personal accounts so you don't get pulled off tasks. Schedule chunks of uninterrupted time. Once you get focused, stay focused. Although it's easier said than done, a helpful way to make sure that you keep your mind on track is to clear out a specified uninterrupted time frame where you focus solely on the project at hand. It means turning off your phone, going to someplace quiet. What about putting your headphones in? Whether you want to play some tunes or not, it's up to you. People are far less likely to disrupt you if they see you are zoned out with headphones in. Could also assume you're on a conference call. Meditate before going into the office. Take a couple minutes right before you wake up to clear your mind and meditate. This is according to the Art Living Foundation. They say morning meditation is particularly powerful because it recharges and prepares you for those challenges that lie ahead. It says eliminate unnecessary meetings. Face-to-face communication is vital, but sometimes those long, endless meetings can just be a waste of time. Make 60-second decisions. If you want to get things more done during your day, you've got to work fast. Start by cutting down the amount of time it takes for you to make a decision. Decision-making can be one of the most time-consuming tasks you do on a daily basis. So cut it down on the time you take. Limit yourself to 60 seconds to make the decision. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about creating your strategy. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. Very happy to be here with you today. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Today we're talking about getting things done. Getting things done even if we don't want to do them. Right before the break, we were talking about some tips and tricks that we can use. There were 17 that we went through, such as waking up early, daily to-do lists, the hardest things first, clear off your desk, 60-second rule, and other. In this segment, I want to talk a little bit about your strategy and how we're going to go about helping you create a strategy to get things done. I think it's important for us from a strategic perspective when we're thinking about our plans, thinking about what we want to do, the actions that we need to be focusing on. It's very helpful to have a systematic approach. Now, the systematic approach that I use is a 5-step process, and it includes, number 1, awareness, assess and analyze, strategize and plan, implement your plan, and support and evaluate. Now, frameworks are like anything, right? There's multiple frameworks. There's many ways to do this. But for me, it's very helpful to break it down into those areas where the awareness is thinking about, what are our goals? What are we trying to achieve? What are the things that are not getting done that we have to do, and become aware of it? It might be painfully obvious because you got fired from a job, you didn't get the promotion, somebody left you in your life or something along those lines. That's pretty aware. It's a shocking event. You're now going to realize that and hopefully take action. But many of us get to a point where we're doing just enough to get by, and we're never going to have that shocking moment happen that forces us to do something. It's a forcing function. So we want to start thinking about this. What is it that we're trying to achieve? We might be absolutely the best we can at organizing, and we're not going to be able to get any better. So why focus on it? If that's the case, to be doing and creating a strategy for. But if it is, we want to then assess and analyze the situation. What is it that we are not doing? We talked here about a bunch of different things that could keep you from doing what you have to do. We talked about the leaders of small businesses and how they were spending some additional time in their work week doing low priority tasks, right? Is that you? Is that where you are? We then went through some of the main reasons why we might be putting things off. We were afraid. We didn't feel like it. It was hard, boring, or unpleasant. From an assessment perspective, why are we doing what we're doing? There was also, the article that talked about the ADHD. And is there a perhaps chemical reason, an imbalance in regard to why we're not able to get those things done? So depending on the assessment of our situation, the assessment of why we're not doing these things, that's going to help us with our strategy and plan. So once you've been able to narrow it down and figure out exactly what it is, you're then going to be able to put your plan together. And from there, we can identify those various courses of actions. So if you're somebody who just mentally can't get with it, it might be time to go get an evaluation. Because if you're not in the proper state of mind, no amount of planning or no amount of tips and tricks is going to help you. You have to have that professional assessment. There's other things that could be keeping you. You could not be a healthy weight. You might not be physically fit. There could be some emotional issues. So if you've kind of gone through some of these tips and tricks and they're not working, it's time to seek additional help and try and really figure out what's going to help you get into the proper state so you can solve the problem. From a strategy and planning perspective, we always want to try some of these activities. Is the 60-second rule where you have to make a decision the best thing to do? Perhaps a coin flip. Heads one decision, tails another, getting it done. It all comes down to really finding out ways that we can assess our current situation, assess what we're doing, but not only what we're doing and not doing, but why are we doing and not doing. And as you start to go through your day, start to swap out the strategies and think about, what would I do if I did this? So for example, if you've been a planner and have a calendar out there and have all these items listed, but you're never getting things done on your to-do list, why aren't you able to get them done? There might be another way you could organize the data so that you would. And that, we learned that you might want to consider scheduling it, or there was the if then logic that we could use. If I'm in a situation and some condition happens, if I'm having a verbal conversation and you say some word, I'm then going to do this. If you're having a conversation with the boss and something comes up with regard to salary, maybe then you're going to say, I have been working here for so long and I wanted to talk about ways that I could get a raise. Having those preset if-then condition statements before you go into a conversation can help you make sure that you bring that up when you're in the conversation. And I think it's also difficult if you don't have a good understanding of where you're spending your time and what you're spending your time on. So making sure that you've captured all those activities and make sure that they're either written down or you put together a picture or you digitally captured them. However you did it, make sure that you've got an accurate list of those activities that you do. And then we need to implement the plan, right? I mean, we've got this plan in place. How are you going to test this in the real world? If you want to use the if-then reasoning and use that little tip, how are you going to implement it? When are you going to implement it? Who are you going to implement it with? So really starting to implement it, test these new tactics out, test these tips out. Try getting up earlier for a week, see how you feel. Try something that is different than what you are doing. If you were not able to get your work done in your office place, try the Starbucks. If you're in the Starbucks all the time and getting distracted, try going home. If you're at home and you're not able to get things done, try cleaning off your desk. All these little tips and tricks will work. The challenge is that you have to know when to apply those to help keep you motivated so that you can continue with the progress. So, because we become accustomed, we get into these habits and we start to think, well, this time it worked, this trick worked once, that's the only trick I'm going to use going forward. But the thing is that you get so used to it that tip might not work for you and you need to find a new one. And of course, once you've got your plan in place, it's important to get support and evaluation. Ask a friend, find a mentor, get someone who you can trust to talk about it with. You're listening to My Strategy. I am your host, John M. Hawkins. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. When we come back, we're going to talk about getting your plan put into place. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back, everyone. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. You've been listening to My Strategy. We're coming to you live from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio. Well, I'm very happy to be here and so glad that you were able to join us as well. Today, we've been talking about getting things done. And if you've missed this broadcast or just joining us, you can listen on iHeartRadio or Apple iTunes. And if you'd like to have something covered in the show, you can send an email to talk@johnmhawkins.com or give us a call at 844-MY-STRATEGY. And if you want to get entered into the weekly giveaway, you have about 8 minutes to send your email. So send it to talk@johnmhawkins.com. We're then going to get that list and figure out who wins our giveaway for the week. All right, so we've been talking about how do we get things done even if we don't want to do them. Well, I think it's been an interesting show. You know, we started off talking about some of the executives and business owners who are out there trying to grow their businesses. They're successful. They're able to accomplish a lot. Yet, when we, heard from an organizational person who focuses on these businesses, he said there's over 21.8 hours a week that these executives are wasting. Time spent on low-value tasks, time spent doing jobs that they didn't need to do, or being on YouTube. So just imagine if this is an executive, a leader of a company who's doing that. How would their life benefit if they were able to reduce it? Well, and the same is true for us as well, right? We want to start thinking about, from our own personal development perspective, what are the reasons why we're putting things off? Now, we might not have all the responsibility and be accountable like those business owners or executives, but there could be reasons that we're putting things off. Are we afraid that we're going to mess up? Right? Afraid, you're fearful. You don't want to do something because you could mess up. Or you don't feel like doing it. Something that just doesn't feel right. Why am I doing this? Is it hard, boring, or unpleasant? There's lots of reasons why we don't do things, and I think it's important for us to think about that from the perspective of, why are we not doing it? Are we not doing it because we're trying to, or actually take a better look at it and say, how are we working on this? Are we looking at gaining an accomplishment, or are we looking to protect what we have? We talked a little bit about that. We also talked about some tips and tricks from a different perspective. It was someone with ADHD in the situation where you might have a condition that's keeping you from getting things done. Well, it's important to understand if there are any conditions out there that you're afflicted with, to get the help you need, because no amount of tips and tricks is going to 100% solve it. If there is a professional evaluation, you're getting medication or whatever it is, that's going to help you as well. We talked a little bit about getting too much information, being too distracted to finish, and boring tasks. But I think, fundamentally, some of those tips would work for anyone. We then talked a little bit about the strategies to get things done. Waking up early, daily to-do list, the hardest thing first, clean off your desks, and exercise. And I think all of this gets me to think that breaking habits is not easy. We need to have a constant awareness of the patterns or the habits that we are doing on a daily basis. And once we have the ability to identify those habits, those patterns, we then need to do a conscious prioritization and commitment to changing those habits for the better. You've been listening to My Strategy. I'm your host, John M. Hawkins. We've come to you from the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio, and this is My Strategy. Happy to be here with you. We'll see you next time.